Work Package 4, we engaged with a very wide variety of stakeholders. So this was stakeholders across the creative industries. So this was everything from individual creators, including social media influencers, to small companies, to documentary filmmakers, and immersive cultural heritage practitioners, as well as other industries sort of across the EU that would be impacted by questions around copyright and territoriality. So the work I think that Work Package 4 has done will really be of interest both to specific people working within the creative industries in particular countries. So for instance, our work engaged with creators in, for instance, Estonia, in the UK, in the Netherlands. But a lot of the insights, I think, from that work will be relevant to multiple stakeholders in the EU. And I should say also, one of the particular projects in Work Package 4 actually dealt with creative industries that actually don't make use of copyright or make use of norms that are like copyright, but aren't copyright. So actually a lot of the work that we've done in Work Package 4 will also be of interest to industries looking to understand both how copyright can work for them, how they might make use of other norms for protecting their work, but also actually more generally, and this is in particular in the work on new business models, to look at how they might take advantage of digitization and the copyright rules. So the problems that we look to solve in our work, again, are really varied, simply because of the range of questions that have been addressed across Work Package 4. So we have teams from multiple institutions that are giving sort of very particular and sort of interesting perspectives on the work. So we have a team that, at Create at Glasgow, as well as teams from Amsterdam, from Tartu, and from Sant'Anna in Pisa. And I suppose I could say that the fundamental questions that we've been dealing with relate to how copyright law can be used to support diversity and access to culture, but looking at this at sort of micro and macro levels. So something that I thought I could highlight, and these are just a few of the issues that the teams have looked at. So the Estonian team from the University of Tartu, for instance, has been look at the significance of creative hubs and how they work, or, for example, understanding in very particular works and supported by empirical research, understanding how digitization works within the creative industries, in particular, how digitization is transforming value chains. And actually, I think what's really interesting there is how they've come to understand the ways in which both individuals and different types of enterprises have responded to the challenges of digitization, including after the pandemic. And in particular, the team has identified, I think, the ways in which these individuals and enterprises have sort of leveraged the opportunities of digitization in terms of production, consumption, and also the preservation of cultural diversity, which I think is really interesting. And so I should add perhaps that they have done this in a way that is very much rooted within the stakeholder groups by engaging with, for instance, influencers, and really trying to understand the emerging business models that influencers and particular enterprises are adopting. So in terms of problem solving then, what we really see here is work like this in Work Package 4, filling particular gaps in our knowledge. In a related field, again, with the team from the University of Tartu, the researchers there have have undertaken empirical work to see how agglomeration works in practice, in particular entrepreneurship patterns in the context of agglomerated enterprises, and then looking at how this works in particular areas. Here it was in Tallinn. So really understanding how copyright works in a sense sort of on the ground, or how digitization works in the context of particular places. Something else actually that's worth mentioning, again, just picking out just one of the topics that's related to Work Package 4, and that is the problem that I mentioned earlier relating to targeted stakeholders. And that is about certain industries not necessarily making use of copyright. This is important, and the particular problem or the gap that it's addressing is actually the lack of research that we have EU-wide on this. So this particular problem about the ways in which different creative communities perhaps choose to forego copyright or other intellectual property protection, such as tattoo artists, magicians, roller derby participants, and many others. This is something that has generally been studied in North America, but has not really been studied, or at least not in detail, within the European Union. So the team from Sant'Anna in Pisa has so far engaged in a scoping study effectively to address the literature and to start to understand what this looks like in the EU, and are currently and will soon be producing work that actually presents us with new, original empirical research looking at EU-specific case studies. So having done sort of the mapping of how this so-called negative space of intellectual property works, generally they will actually find out more. A number of challenges faced by the creative industries, and I think one of these is a general one that actually is useful, obviously, to the creative industries, but I think it's also a bigger question, which is something that reCreating Europe engages with, and something that's a very hot topic, which is about the role of territoriality in the context of copyright, and in particular the operation of copyright and other intellectual property rights within the digital single market. So this is a big project that's involving stakeholders in various roundtables, etc., that is being undertaken by IVIR at the University of Amsterdam. And the key recommendations and information that is flowing from that will be within some of the final deliverables on that task. But in terms of already completed tasks within Work Package 4, I think the key recommendations relating to access to digital culture and sort of ways of making the most, as it were, of copyright, we can find in the work undertaken by CREATE at the University of Glasgow, and again, IVIR at the University of Amsterdam, on best practice codes for documentary filmmakers and for immersive cultural heritage practitioners, both within the United Kingdom and the Netherlands. Before actually addressing that, it occurs to me to actually mention what some of the issues are that arise in respect of the creative industries in these industries, but I think which are relevant to all kinds of people working within the creative industries in the EU. And there are broadly two of them. One is access to reliable copyright information, and the other is really looking at sort of more specific questions around, well, what kind of material can I use under what circumstances for my particular industry? So there's this sort of more general question around access to copyright information, and the more specific question about documentary filmmakers and immersive cultural heritage practitioners. And so before going back to this question of recommendations, it might be useful to identify what people have said in the workshops for documentary filmmakers and also immersive cultural heritage practitioners. And I think some of these problems actually will sound quite familiar to other groups as well. And these included particular problems such as the fact that it's very time consuming and expensive to engage in rights clearance. So effectively, what the researchers found was that it can often be completely unaffordable to clear rights, often because of the high licensing fees. And that's actually even before the related problem, which is that it can be very difficult to identify who the rights holder is, because they can be very difficult to find. There are also further difficulties posed in actually understanding what the copyright exceptions are. And so it can be actually quite difficult to figure out how to make use of the flexibilities that are available within copyright. So copyright has lots of really useful flexibilities. So there is a sort of openness there, but equally what the work has found here is that maybe the best use can't be made of it because their scope is not immediately clear to the filmmakers and immersive cultural heritage curators who want to make use for them. So that's a sort of a long introduction to saying, well, what is the key recommendation here? What is the solution? Well, one of the solutions in that particular task, which builds on similar work that's been done elsewhere, but again, more in North America, perhaps, than within Europe, is the creation of best practice codes for particular creative industries. So what the team, the Evere and Create team, has done there is to, based on the work that they have done with the relevant stakeholders, is to produce best practice copyright codes for documentary filmmakers on the one hand and immersive cultural heritage practitioners on the other. Now, even though these copyright codes are related to the UK and the Netherlands, they have been drafted in a way that will be useful and interesting, in fact, to those creators actually elsewhere within the EU. And actually, I would say probably would be of use to the creative industries, just in terms, more generally, just in terms of getting a sense of what openness there is in terms of, and also I suppose what restrictions there are in terms of how material can be used and reused. So some of the examples of best practice that are provided in these codes relate to the lawful reuse of copyright material. They include particular hints and tips on how to make use of exceptions, such as for parody and pastiche. There is also, and this is of particular use, I think, to documentary filmmakers, reference to the freedom of panorama and also incidental inclusion provisions, which is very important and super useful, really, when thinking about people filming in public places. So giving guidance on what it is that you can use in that context. So this is something that is very much worth looking up, just like the existing deliverables on the reCreating Europe Zenodo page to get more information. So this, of course, will be, you can find there not only the information on the best practice codes, but also the reports on copyright and territoriality, on the negative space of copyright, and other areas as well. To learn more about copyright law, have a look at the reCreating Europe Zenodo page. About my top tip for learning more about copyright and accessing really helpful guidance is the soon-to-be released Copyright User EU platform, which is being developed by the Create team at the University of Glasgow in collaboration with, of course, all of reCreating Europe. And this will be an excellent source of easy to understand information on copyright law in the EU.